good.
All right, well, thank you all for being out here today. You know, July 1, 2023 was a really exciting day for the university, for UTSA athletics, and it's coming off of such an incredible year. We've had incredible success in competition, national rankings, conference championships. We've also had record-breaking numbers in our academics and fundraising, so it's very fitting that we move in this momentum and this trajectory moving into the American Athletic Conference. We've talked about this. This is something that we were positioning ourselves for. We knew that it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when conference realignment would happen. And we'd been working on this for many years to be in the right position. So we are really excited for the future trajectory, for the momentum that we have moving forward. The American is going to provide us, obviously a national exposure, particularly through our ESPN media rights. It's going to provide us opportunity for more revenue generation. It's going to provide us opportunity to enhance the university profile, the brand, the image. So a lot of great reasons. More Texas ties, matchups. So really excited for this upcoming year and what we're going to be able to accomplish. So this summer, we've been talking about this visit to help kick off our entry into the American. We had asked Commissioner Mike Aresco to join us to come to San Antonio to learn more about our great city, to engage with our incredible San Antonian natives and business folks, elected officials, with our university officials, with our student athletes, our coaches, our staff, student leaders. So he has a very jam-packed schedule in the next couple of days, but it's really an opportunity for him to get to know you all, to get to know San Antonio, and to get to know UTSA and the great things that we have to offer. So without further ado, I guess I don't know if I'm introducing him, but Commissioner Aresco, please.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I haven't done one of these in a while. Usually you do it sitting down somewhere with looks like the Politburo or something. But thrilled to be here. And as Lisa said, we're really excited about UTSA coming into the conference. They bring so much, and this community brings so much. I kind of said to myself, why didn't we do it before? We had 11 teams for a while, and we didn't expand. You just can't get a better program coming in. In fact, I know the football team will probably contend for the championship the very first year. Everybody's pretty excited about that. But our philosophy of expansion has been we try to identify schools that have a commitment to being at the highest level, because this league, and we can talk about this, we get this business about the P5, and some of you may have seen some of the things I've written about it. We've been one of those power conferences from the very beginning. When when UCF beat Baylor in the Gas Bowl back in 2013, and then we've been on New Year's Day 8 out of 10 years. I could go on about our 70 wins over P5 teams in football, our basketball success, our women's basketball success when UConn was in the conference. We've done a lot, and we've been at that level, and so we want teams that aspire to that level. We never wanted to be second-class citizens just because we didn't have that branding, that P5 business. And we put a pretty strong campaign on about P6, Power 6. We were ready to go to the NSA Council back in 2021. We wrote a long letter to the chairs of the P5 conferences, and it's a letter that I think still resonates about why we should have been in that group. And then we got diverted a bit, and there was some disruption because of the realignment in 21 when we lost the 3 teams. But I am more confident than ever now, knowing that we've added UTSA, that we've added a North Texas university that is obviously spending money. They're committed. We have UAB, which we've always had our eye on. FAU just hired Tom Herman, as you know, and you know what they all did in basketball. Charlotte's got great growth potential. But speaking of that again, we look for large cities and large markets if, in fact, a school in a market like that has that commitment that we're looking for. And San Antonio is a growing market. It really is, and it's a dynamic market. And UTSA is a dynamic young university. And I knew, they've had football success for a while. I remember they beat one of our teams, Houston, several years ago, and they may have beaten Arizona. I know they had a game against Arizona. They either beat them or came close. This was in their very early years too. So we're thrilled that they're joining. I know that there are a lot of other sports that'll benefit from the exposure that you get in our league. That's one of the things I think that probably attracted Lisa and Taylor, to the American. We have an all-encompassing deal with ESPN, so we have exposure on ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPN Plus, in addition to the promotion of ESPN. I think we've been on game day 4 times, maybe even 5 times over the years in football. So ESPN is a great partner to have. We also have CBS in basketball for some of our games. ESPN does the other games. So all in all, that exposure will be, I think, enormously important to UTSA as the university continues to build its brand. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'm delighted to be here. I know we have a lot of events over the next few days. Really excited for the university and also for Lisa and her staff.
It sounds like with the addition of UTSA and the other schools that you feel like that the American is trending up, and I don't know about the P5 conversation, but it should continue in some way, the conversation?
I absolutely do. And that's an important question. It's a great question, because what happened when we lost UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati, people said, well, you've lost 3 of your key schools. You can't really be the same. And I thought, well, first of all, Houston, and this is, I want to say this is not to denigrate anyone, but Houston's won our championship once in 10 years, once. Cincinnati for 6 or 7 years struggled, and then Luke Fickell came and they did great, and we were thrilled for them, and we were thrilled that they made the playoff. Even though they had announced they were leaving, they're still part of our group, and that will always be our legacy. In addition, UCF had that great period, the 25-game winning streak. It solidified their national brand. They haven't won our championship since 18. It's not like the Tulanes of the world, the Memphises of the world didn't have great football during all those years. Temple had great football. We had other teams that had great football. We've had other teams win our championship. When I look now at the teams coming in, and again, I mentioned commitment. When I saw FAU hiring Tom Herman, I was obviously thrilled. Tom was our guy. He built Houston. He had the 2 great years at Houston. They made the Peach Bowl in his tenure. They beat Oklahoma. They had a shot at the playoff in 2016. They faltered a bit. So that was a great move. When I look at UTSA and Jeff Traylor, and we know what he's done, we know what the program has done the last 2 years with the championships, this gives me a lot of hope that these schools will do exactly what UCF did, what Cincinnati did, what Houston did. And one of the ESPN commentators said recently that our league is like rocket fuel for teams coming into this league because of the way we promote the conference, the exposure we get, the way we go about our business, the Thursday, Friday games that give us a lot of national exposure. And I think that's going to be true of the teams in this league who maybe haven't gotten the attention. Also, we're kind of the, I wouldn't call it the fly in the ointment, but we're the guys that are always the ones in the news. I think we probably made more news over the 10 years than a lot of P5 conferences because we were always on the cusp of the playoff. I was very outspoken, but I think never attacked anyone personally, but I was outspoken about the fact that we had a Cincinnati team that was undefeated in 2020, and it was ranked lower than a 2-loss Iowa State team that had lost to Louisiana by 17 points at home. And I said, how could that be? And Cincinnati should have beaten Georgia in the Peach Bowl. They had them on the ropes. They were about to win the game, and then it just didn't work out. But the point is that was an outstanding team. The following year, they make the playoff, and they play creditably against Alabama. And so there were all those years when we had those issues, and the league was in the spotlight. And I think the league will again be in the spotlight because you're seeing a lot of transition now. You're seeing a lot of turmoil among the so-called P5. I don't know whether there'll be a P5, a P4, a P3, a P2. We don't know anymore. And that's why I thought it would be better to just get rid of that nomenclature because, when you put that, and by the way, the G5 is going to go away as any official designation. I can tell you that. The only reason that exists is because there's a separate pool of revenue in the CFP, and one was allocated to the group of 5, others were allocated to the P5. Whatever we call it down the road, we're going to get rid of the G5 name officially, and that's going to be important. And then we hope to wean the media off it so they don't use it anymore. And it's 10 FBS conferences. Okay, which ones are elite, which ones are power? Ours has been power from day one. I mean, you can't argue with 8 out of 10 New Year's Day games, 4 wins, by the way, against top 10 teams. We've never played a team It wasn't either top 5 or top 10 on New Year's Day, and we've never been blown out. Any game we've lost has been by a touchdown, one-score game. Whether it was, LSU, and if Mackenzie Milton had been healthy, we probably would have won that game. We lose to Georgia on the last 53-yard field goal with 2 seconds left. That's the kind of league we are. We're gritty, we're competitive. None of our kids are daunted by the competition they play. That's what I love about UTSA. Those kids aren't going to be fazed one bit about the competition they're going to be facing, not only in our league, but generally. And they do have a tough schedule. I mean, I think you're at Tennessee, you've got Houston, you've got Army. I mean, we challenge ourselves. I counted 25 games against the likes of Washington and Michigan and Notre Dame twice, and Oklahoma. They'll be visiting Tulsa. We've got, just game after game like that. And Clemson, we're at Clemson. These are really high-risk games, but they're also high-reward games if you win or you play competitively. We had 3 teams in the top 25 last year, which was really nice to see. And I think this year, I don't see any reason why we can't have multiple teams in the top 25 again. So I'm very optimistic. When I took these teams, we didn't know precisely what we had. We didn't know what FAU would do in basketball. People were saying, well, this guy must be a genius. He knew that. And I said, are you kidding? We look at football as a driver for realignment. Everybody does. Anybody who tells you they don't is not being honest with you. And yet, basketball is important, and we like to see good basketball in our league. And as you know, we've had Houston, we've had Wichita State, we've had Cincinnati, we've had UConn for all those years. So we had good basketball, and we've had good women's basketball, but football drives it. And yet here is FAU making the Final Four, which was a great bonus. And then we realized, North Texas plays UAB in the NIT championship game, and North Texas wins that. Charlotte plays in the CBA. So that was a bonus for us. But in terms of football, I always felt that the teams would hire good coaches. They would be competitive. Charlotte's an interesting case with Biff Poggi. That's a very fascinating hire. I talked to Biff. He was a hedge fund manager. He worked at Michigan. He's sort of like the fellow Mobley at Coastal Carolina. You know what they've done with that program. So when you look at UTSA, that's a ready-made program. That's a program that's already at the top, and should be a great competition. SMU will have a strong team. Memphis will have a strong team. East Carolina will have a strong team. UTSA, FAU coming in, a few other of the new schools. Our league is probably deeper than it's been. We had a few teams that tapered off a little bit. Memphis, by the way, people forget how good they were for 10 years. They had that great rivalry with UCF. They did make the Cotton Bowl one year. They had some great games against UCF and others. They had great wins in the Liberty Bowl that helped cement our conference as a top conference when they beat Ole Miss after Ole Miss had just beaten Alabama. So, you could go back and look at all the things we've done, and everybody's contributed. So I think I'm very optimistic. I know it's a long-winded answer to your question, but this league is poised now, I think, to do exactly what we've done the last 10 years. When anytime you have some disruption, you have some realignment, you say, okay, you have to take stock and say, where are you? Can we be what we were? I don't think there's any doubt in my mind.
Mike, what's your impression of San Antonio, and what does the city bring to the league?
Well, I love San Antonio myself, and as I said to Lisa, I've been here many, many times. We've had obviously multiple Final Fours here. The men's basketball committee used to meet here when I was at CBS. I've been to San Antonio. I was here just not too long ago. Houston was obviously in the regional. I was here again for something else. I love the city. I mean, how do you not love the city? The river walk, and it's not just the river walk. It's the city itself. It's a dynamic city. Obviously the Alamo is a huge attraction for everybody, and obviously a huge historical, it has so much meaning for the country. But San Antonio is also a growing city. I think, as I recall, it's the largest, in terms of land, it's one of the largest cities in the country in terms of the overall square mileage of the city itself. It's also a very big military presence. I know that UTSA has drawn extremely well. Got a great growing community here, and I love the city, and great restaurants too.
Yeah.
Mike, you and I talked right after you guys voted UTSA in, and you talked about the weight of the brand. Time has passed, that brand's gotten bigger, more exposure. Talk about what you're getting now versus what you thought you were getting then.
It's interesting because again, I knew UTSA had a good football program, and a little under the radar because you don't get the exposure in the previous conference. But the last few years really come into your own. I think last year I watched the Houston UTSA game, and I love what Lisa did when somebody on the committee said USTA, and you put the tennis court in the formidable football field. I thought that was great. The point is, I watched that game and I was rooting for Houston only because they were still in our conference. Your heart is kind of with UTSA knowing they're coming in, but that was a great football game. And that really showed me, what you have and what kind of coach Jeff is. So I think it's only gotten better in that regard, because we made the decision back in 2021. And at that point, you then proceeded to win, conference championships, and the bowl game, you really outplayed, the team in Troy in the bowl game. You probably should have won the game. It's one of those games. It's sort of like, Cincinnati outplaying Georgia the whole game back in 2020 in the Peach Bowl and not winning. But the point is, you've got an outstanding program. I also love the feistiness of Jeff. He's talking about, people might try to raid the roster, and that's going to be a bigger issue in this day of, getting rid of the year in residency, which I thought was a useful thing for college sports. I really did. College football, really, big time college sports. The football and basketball is where it really mattered. When you combine that with NIL, you end up with a perfect storm, and I think you end up with a lot of instability, and you end up with kids making decisions quickly that maybe they regret later. And we're going to have to adapt to that new world. I think we will. We'll probably use the transfer portal just as well as anyone, but. UTSA, when we took the university and the program, we knew that football would be a driver. We knew that football was good. We also knew that the university's committed to facilities and to its other sports. We had a lot of confidence in Lisa as an AD and Taylor Amy, and Taylor was very aggressive. So that's what we wanted, and I think it's all looking up from when we made the decision.
Commissioner, how was the decision made to bring on 14 teams as opposed to the previous 11?
That's a good question. Well, we started this conference in 2013 with 10 teams. You almost needed an index card to know who was in or out because you'd had so much turmoil with realignment. And we still had Louisville and Rutgers in the conference back then. So we started with a 10-team conference. We ended up winning the Fiesta Bowl. We won the national championship in football and basketball. And to me, that told everyone right away we were a power conference and we belonged. And it's only been uphill from there, in terms of what we've done. We then ended up at 12 when we took Tulsa and East Carolina, and then Navy joined in 15. That rounded out 12. Started a football championship game in 2015, which incidentally over 8 years has been on ABC every single year. Think about that. Every single year, and and then we lost UConn, but we didn't replace UConn at that point because we decided that we would not have divisions anymore. We would just have our top 2 teams playing the championship game. We thought at some point there might be a school that will emerge and we'll want to add a 12, but we were kind of keeping our powder dry on that. And we don't really talk a lot about realignment publicly. If we're asked, people have asked about SMU and the Pac-12, and we'll answer candidly that if something happens, it happens. But they've been a great partner, a great member of the league, and we're not worried about it. And then when we were down at 8, we talked to ESPN, our partner, and they've been great. They said we'll support expansion. Whether you want to get back to 10, 12, whatever. We really didn't think about 14 initially, but when we looked around, the obvious choices were schools like UAB, UTSA, Rice, North Texas. We really wanted to solidify our presence in Texas. That was really important because this state is critical to us. This state is not only a football hotbed, a huge recruiting territory, but it's the DNA of our league is competitiveness and to be really, especially to be really good in football. And Texas is epicenter of that. Our office is now in Dallas. We moved there several years ago. So we wanted to solidify our presence in Texas. So we now have 4 teams in Texas. And then we looked around, and UAB had always been sort of on our doorstep. We knew they had a good program. Their coach, Bill Clark, had done a great job resurrecting the program. I know he's retired, but so we looked at them. And then we easily could have stayed at 12. You know, we had those, you know, those four, you know, the three in Texas to join SMU and then UAB. And then we looked around and we thought, well, there might be more realignment down the road. Nobody knows, right? And we thought there might be some strength in numbers, you know, if we went to 14, but there had to be schools that made sense. And we knew about FAU. We knew that they'd hired Lane Kiffin. We knew that they were competitive. The UCF people kept telling us that's a good program. And I had a lot of confidence in Brian White, you know, Danny White's brother. The White family means a lot to me. Kevin White was a friend and mentor for many, many years. I'm kind of showing my age, you know, I know the whole family. And I knew that they were committed, and I didn't know they were this good in basketball, obviously. So we looked at FAU and we thought, okay, we don't want to be at 13. And I knew Mike Hill from my days working in SEC football for many, many years at CBS, and he worked for the master, Jeremy Foley, and I knew Mike was committed. I'd heard about the campus I haven't been there yet, but I will be there. I'll visit all the new schools. UTA is the first I'm making, you know, visit. You're the first, but there'll be others. And I knew they had a beautiful campus. I knew they were, you know, in Charlotte, a major banking center in this day of, you know, NIL and media. It's a media-driven world. We thought Charlotte was an attractive place. We knew they were committed. And we thought, you know, there were some other schools that called us, of course. You know, anytime realignment hits, you get 30 calls. You know, it's just the nature of the business. And we thought, well, let's, you know, we'll probably have naysayers, we always do, who will say, well, you know, yeah, Charlotte doesn't have an established football program yet. Are you guys going to dilute your brand? You know, FAU is a nice school, but, you know, does it have the kind of, you know, the credentials that the others you're taking have? Even people question just, they say, well, you know, Rice hasn't had a big, you know, had a lot of success the last several years. And yet we looked at Rice and said, that's an old Southwest Conference school. It's in Houston. It's a huge, important market. They're investing. I think the board there showed us that they were willing to make the investment. They've got a great coach. I think they're on the cusp of being really good. So we thought, you know, we're in the business of developing brands and developing programs. And it just seemed that Charlotte was the kind of program that the ACC schools love to play Charlotte. They play home and home, and that's not as easy in our league to get, as you know. I know Lisa probably knows all the challenges about scheduling. And the minute we have really good teams, people say, well, gee, you know, do we want to play them? And fortunately, we have scheduled probably 150 or more games against the so-called P5 over the next 10 years. We've got a lot of games against them, and I talked about this year, about 25 games that are going to be really tough games. So anyway, we decided to go to 14. A risky decision up to a point, but I think it's panned out really well. We're thrilled to have FAU. We think Charlotte's they've got great plans to renovate their stadium, expand it. Their community has tremendous support. I've talked to the Chamber of Commerce there. They their board is committed, and that's all we want. That's all we ask for.
Like, what do you want to see from UTSA in terms of their facilities that they have now, and in terms of developing some things?
Well, I know Lisa's got plans for basketball, and I'll be at the field house tomorrow, the opening of the field house, and that's exciting. And I know this too, and I use this with our other school. That's, you know, UTSA has increased their budget. They made a huge increase in their budget, you know, to be in our league. That was the other thing. We had some schools that we had some interest in who actually called us and said, you know, we don't have the resources to be in your conference, because we know you have to spend at a certain level to be competitive and to stay competitive. So what, you know, UTSA, obviously the Alamo Dome here provides a great venue. You get great crowds. You know, I don't know what the plans are for the Dome, but the point is you've got what you need here. You know, you've got a bigger capacity than some of our stadiums. You've got a great venue here. You've got an excited fan base. We'll just look to have UTSA invest like they said they would, and they will. I don't think there's any question. We're already doing it, and that's what you want. Also, to be in a market like this, you know, a city like this, a dynamic city, is really important, because in our league, you'll be surprised. I think you'll all be surprised with the exposure that UTSA will get in our league. You know, and because it's going to be one of our better teams right away in football, you're going to see games on, you know, on ESPN, on ESPN2. You might even get an ABC game here and there. You know, ABC, has typically guaranteed us three appearances a year on ABC. We've had as many as 6. You know, they've over-delivered over the years. They don't have to do those games, but they usually do. And I think UTSA has a chance to really, you know, get some of that exposure. And then that helps also highlight your city, you know, when you get that. And I don't know how many, I couldn't tell you precisely how many appearances of that nature you've had over the last few years, but I know it's just going to be different now for you, and I think that's going to be a big factor.
Commissioner, you talked about football being the driver. Looking ahead to the future, CFP expanding out to a bigger field. How will that help the American when that field expands?
Great question. You know, when you really think about it, we would have been in a playoff that's structured the way it is now going forward. We would have been in it 8 times out of 10 years. You know, 8 out of 10 years we'd have been in a playoff and had a shot at the championship. And we probably had 4 or 5 teams that were, you know, worthy of being in the playoff, but with a 4-team playoff, and especially with some of the, you know, I don't want to use the term bias. I guess the term is more, you know, this whole strength of schedule business was often used against us, even though we had a really good league and a good strength of schedule, and we played good non-conference games. But what this 6-6 plan does is give us an opportunity every year to be in the playoff, and it's really important. The other thing too is we're the reason I think it's 6-6. I'm going to talk about that in my media day speech next week up in Dallas. If it weren't for our success over the last 10 years, what do you think would have happened? It would have been, in all likelihood, the power guys will get their 5 slots. You guys, we hadn't had the success we had, they could have either written us off and said, you guys will, you'll take one of the at-large spots if you qualify. And one of the things I fought for 12 years ago was to make sure we had a guaranteed spot on New Year's Day for the so-called group of 5 top team. If we hadn't had that, there were plenty of times when we were not ranked in the top 12. UCF wasn't ranked in the top 12. They wouldn't have been able to play in that Peach Bowl where they upset Auburn. I mean, think about that. So you had to have that opportunity. That's what this new playoff does. And the fact that it's 6-6 really works in our favor. You know, we didn't want 5+1 either. We didn't want this branding that, you know, oh, there'll be one team from the so-called group of 5 and then the other 5 are automatic. I used the example, I wrote an open letter, some of you may have seen it. I use an example. You don't give the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers a privileged position in a playoff simply because they have more money, they've had a longer history, they've had more success. You know, we think they should get an automatic. No, they have to earn it. And that's what this playoff does. And by the way, this playoff is a perfect example of why you should get rid of the P5 and all that branding, because now it's 10 FBS conferences competing for 6 slots. And a few years ago, and I know it was the pandemic year, but it would have been us and Coastal Carolina. It would have been our team, which was Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina, in the playoff. There wouldn't have been a Pac-12 team in that playoff. We have a winning record against the Pac-12. You know, we have you know, wins against all the big conferences, and we consider ourselves a major conference. We always have. So this playoff structure is great for us. Now, one cautionary note: that 12-team playoff it's a tough road. You know, we've got to really be careful on how we schedule now and how we run the regular season, because you're asking teams potentially to play 4 games to win a championship, on top of maybe playing in a conference championship game, on top of a rivalry game at the end of the season. That's tough. That's a tough deal. And you know, we thought originally, well, it's probably more likely that the teams with the byes will end up, you know, in the championship game, so people will only play 3 games. But the truth is, when you looked at what happened, because of the way we do it, the 4 teams that would get the byes aren't necessarily the teams that might get to the championship game. I mean, last year you would have had Ohio State, you would have had Alabama, you would have had teams like that. TCU, who didn't win their conference championships but were in the playoff, and easily, as you know, TCU got to the championship game, and Ohio State could easily have been there. So that's going to be a tough road. We're going to have to make sure we have enough time between games. We're going to have to make sure that we, you know, have the regular season set up in a way that, you know, we get people have byes, that people can also. We're trying to cut back the number of plays in each game, you know, because, you know, if you eliminate, for instance, we've eliminated now stopping the clock after every first down until maybe the last 2 minutes of the game. You could eliminate enough plays that would be the equivalent of 2 games during the season, and that's wear and tear on the kids. You know, these are still 18 to 20, 22-year-olds, so you got to be conscious of that. But I love the playoff. The kids love it too. They want to be able to compete. They want to have that opportunity. I mean, look what Tulane did this year, you know, and you know, for all the nonsense you have to put up with sometimes in this job and all the stuff, you know, dealing with, you know, all this whole business about the P5 and all the other, just seeing what Tulane did makes it all worthwhile. That was just absolutely spectacular. And if they'd been in a playoff, they could have advanced, and that's the opportunity that we'll now have.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Excited to be here. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.